The world wants an alternative to China. But can India actually become that power? Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to dive deep into the data to answer what is arguably the defining question of global economics right now. Can India really replace China as the factory of the world?
For decades, we've all basically watched China completely dominate global manufacturing. It's been practically unchallenged. But lately, with shifting geopolitics and supply chains proving to be a lot more fragile than we thought, corporate boardrooms are scrambling. They are aggressively looking for a backup plan. And naturally, all eyes are turning to the world's most populous nation to see if it can genuinely step up to the plate.
But get this, what's really fascinating is that if you rewind to the 1970s, these two absolute giants were on a surprisingly equal economic footing. If you adjust for constant prices, both India and China were sitting at a GDP per capita of around $1,400. They essentially had the same starting line and similar population sizes before taking drastically, completely different paths. So to find an objective answer today, we're going to systematically break down 5 critical realities: the China Plus One strategy, shifting demographics, the hard truths of manufacturing, logistics infrastructure, and finally, their deeply entangled geopolitical relationship. All right, let's jump right into part 1, the China Plus One era, the catalyst for change. So, rising costs and mounting risks in China have essentially forced global corporations to seek long-term stability elsewhere. It's a survival tactic so you don't face sudden massive product shortages. Basically, it's a strategy designed to avoid having all your manufacturing eggs in one giant basket. Companies are desperately looking to places like Vietnam, Malaysia, and of course India to hedge against turbulence and build up parallel capacity. Which brings us to part 2, the demographic divergence. This is literally a tale of two workforces. We are looking at a stark contrast here. Because of historical policies, China's working-age population is aging rapidly, and it's projected to decline to about 60% by 2035. Meanwhile, India's demographic dividend is actively expanding. It's expected to peak at around 68% by 2030. That gives India a massive, energetic, youthful labor advantage over the next decade. Now hold on, because there is a major catch here. To truly reap the benefits of this demographic dividend, India has to drastically improve its female workforce participation. Decades ago, China successfully integrated its female population into the formal economy, and today they sit at about 67%. India? Well, they currently lag far behind at roughly 33%. Unlocking that huge untapped segment is absolutely essential if India actually wants to match China's scale.
Okay, moving on to part 3, manufacturing and supply chains. The absolute heart of the factory.
And the historical divergence here is wild. Over the last 40 years, China aggressively built an export-driven manufacturing base. They went all in. India, on the other hand, traditionally relied heavily on the services sector, think IT and software, while its actual manufacturing basically hovered around just 16 to 17% of its GDP. But India is pivoting, and they are pivoting hard. To offset those historical disadvantages, the government is rolling out massive production-linked incentive schemes to draw in billions in foreign direct investment. Add in a massive 1,000 crore rupee semiconductor mission to build a domestic high-tech ecosystem from scratch, plus heavy pushes for defense and EV batteries. They are aggressively trying to replicate the kind of dense industrial clusters that China perfected. And the craziest part? It's actually working. Take Apple, for example. As part of a deliberate de-risking strategy, they shifted a massive chunk of their supply chain. They are projecting the assembly of 55 million iPhones in India in 2025 alone. That is huge. It proves India's ecosystem is maturing way beyond just basic assembly and can handle complex, high-volume production. Yet we absolutely cannot ignore the staggering scale of China. They alone account for nearly 45% of all global manufacturing output. 45%. And it isn't just assembly, right? China controls the upstream critical raw materials, the active pharmaceutical ingredients, the rare earth metals. It's a deeply entrenched ecosystem of aggressive pricing and immense scale that is incredibly difficult for any single nation to just fully replicate overnight. Producing goods is one thing, but moving them efficiently to global markets is an entirely different beast. That brings us to part 4, the infrastructure reality. Now, contrary to popular perception, recent data reveals India's logistics costs actually compare really favorably to China's. A recent government report pegged India's logistics costs at just 7.97% of its GDP. That totally shatters the old belief that it was hovering around 14%.
It actually puts them comfortably ahead of China's 14.4% and way, way ahead of emerging economies like Indonesia, which sits at 24%.
So, how did they pull off this surprising efficiency? Well, it's driven by incredibly synchronized infrastructure projects over the last 5 years. We're talking massive, massive initiatives like the PM Gati Shakti Logistics Master Plan, dedicated freight corridors, and huge port developments. They're slicing through bureaucratic red tape with digital infrastructure, and they're rapidly integrating renewables to meet those strict green manufacturing standards required by Western markets.
And finally, we have to look at the incredibly complex ties binding these two nations together. Let's explore Part 5, the geopolitical dilemma, the ultimate elephant in the room. We are looking at a stark paradox here, folks. On one hand, you have serious military deterrence. India has deployed some 60,000 troops along the line of actual control. But on the other hand, deep, deep economic reliance. To literally fuel its Make in India boom, India relies on China for about 70% of its active pharmaceutical ingredients and well over 60% of its smartphone parts. And that asymmetric relationship has resulted in a massive trade deficit approaching $100 billion in 2024-25. $100 billion. It highlights a really fundamental reality. Substituting China completely is just incredibly difficult when global supply chains are this deeply entangled. Even as India successfully exports more goods to the US and Europe, it often has to rely on Chinese intermediate parts and raw materials to build those very exports in the first place. So as you digest all these numbers, ask yourself, is a total replacement even realistically possible? Or does the future of global manufacturing rely on a really complicated, delicate balance between these two Asian giants? India is clearly rising, armed with huge demographic advantages and aggressive new policies. But China's entrenched dominance means the factory of the world might not be relocating entirely. It might just be expanding its borders. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the data.